Good morning, Robert. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chimize. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning.
Now, as an investment analyst, what's your take on the president's Independence Day speech? What part of that speech struck you the most?
Well, I think that the speech was somewhat appreciated. I say appreciated because what the president tried to do yesterday was to take Nigerians down the memory lane. So whether that inspired a lot of confidence in Nigerians, it's another thing to now discuss. But the president tried as much as possible to start from, independence, when the British handed over power to Nigerians. And basically, again, from what the president tried to do, most Nigerians will say that they have not really enjoyed, the benefit of being an independent country. Because if you look at countries that we started together in terms of even countries who haven't even attained independence as at the time we got, they are far, most of them are doing better than us, to be honest. And I think that the president did not try to hide some of the challenges that we are facing in terms of how the economy has been run over the years, when he was talking about how we went into military rule and how we have come out of it. And for 21 years now, we're talking about being under a democratic dispensation. But that said, in terms of the economy, I think it is agreed by even the president that the country hasn't done so well. We haven't, managed an economy the way it should be managed. And for so many years, we have, we have not the nail on the head. Look at what is just happening in 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic, struck, and we are all beginning to see the effect globally. That is when the Nigerian government is now beginning to take the right steps that should have been taken. Those steps predate this current government, to be honest, but this government also had an opportunity to have changed the narrative. Since 2015, that was not done. The last episode of recession that we suffered in 2016 gave a very unique opportunity for the government to have made a lot of changes, which they didn't do. But this time around, the government had no choice. I can tell you, if the government had, an option not to make some of these reforms that we're seeing now with increase in electricity tariff and petroleum prices, they would have done that. But now, even government's hands are tied and they can't do so much because the revenue fundamentals of government have suffered a lot. And for them to be able to get this economy out of these current woes, it will mean that some hardship may have to be, visited on Nigerians. Not the intention of government, but like I said, even the government's hands are tied. Because, for example, look at the petroleum subsidy that, prices are now changing in a period when people have lost jobs. Unfortunately, government cannot do much about that because, again, even though people have lost jobs, the fundamentals of that market with exchange rate movement that we have seen will necessitate that prices will have to fluctuate. The same for electricity tariff, which has been increased. And what you see is that for the Nigerian economy to grow, we need that electricity sector to be properly, harnessed. And for us to harness that sector properly, it means that we need to allow market reflective tariff. These are laudable reforms. It's just unfortunate that it's coming at a very wrong time. Like I said, government cannot do anything about it because their hands are tied at the moment. But we'll keep watching the space and seeing and that's why if you go to the streets and you hear the sentiment about the speech, most Nigerians feel there's no joy in the speech, even though the government is trying so hard to explain to Nigerians why some of these tough decisions need to be made.
And how compelling that president's speech around petrol subsidy removal is for the economy at this point. Specifically, he did mention there is no reason why petrol price in Nigeria should be lower than Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, again, it's part of my initial comment, which is that it is now that government just beginning to realize that. Remember, when we had Occupy Nigeria in 2011, in fact, in 2011, the level of awareness of most Nigerians about subsidy was not even that pronounced as we had it in 2015. By 2011, a lot of Nigerians still believe that, because we have so much corruption in the land, why should government remove subsidy, the only thing that the poor man enjoys? I mean, we've argued that the subsidy payment on petrol doesn't, benefit the poor per se, because Nigeria, as we know today, is the poverty capital of the world, which means that most Nigerians live below $1.20 per day. That's barely 600 naira. So what that means is that to be in the actual sense, someone who lives on 600 naira per day, how much of energy demand that does that person need, even in terms of electricity and petrol? So that argument has been made that in the long run, the rich benefit more from petroleum subsidy. But what I'm saying here is that as of 2015, that awareness, was beginning to change. Even some of us that participated, some people that participated at the, rally in 2011, they were blaming themselves by 2015 when we saw how much of wastages, was going into payment of subsidy. And as it is right now, it is the right thing to do for government, albeit the timing is wrong. But like I said, even the government cannot do anything about the timing, because for them to continue to subsidize petrol at this moment, it will mean that there will be no even monies to pay salaries anymore. Those are recurrent expenditure, let alone now investing in capital expenditure. So Nigerians must understand, and I hope that the Labour can support the government on this one. I mean, there are so many things that the government has gotten wrong, but I think the removal of subsidy, this is the best time to do it. I mean, in 2011, we were arguing that was the best time to remove the subsidy on petrol. Perhaps 2015 or 2016 was the second best time to have removed it. This is the third best time. If we don't do it this time around, we may never get out of this particular conundrum. So, I think that what we should be doing as a nation is to support the government, and perhaps we can ask for palliatives, in any way that the government can give palliatives. But definitely, it is not in the interest of this current generation, neither is it in the interest of the generations to come, for government to continue to subsidize consumption in petroleum subsidy or even in electricity tariff. And if we want more jobs to be created in those sectors, this is the time for the government to allow market principles to dictate how we, allocate resources within that particular sector, and then we can create more jobs. And government can, government has promised to create a lot of jobs. And I've argued that these are not jobs that government can create by just sending people to ministries. What's the capacity that government, agencies can take in terms of employment? It is the private sector that will drive, the level of employment that we're expecting to create in this country. And for us to do that, the market principles must be right. The other things to speak to as a country is, we've enjoyed 20 years of uninterrupted democracy. We should be advancing and be getting better. We should focus more on things like rule of law, because they affect businesses. A lot of businesses that want to come to your country to establish, they will check when they are scanning the environment, and they are checking, the political, the environment, the economic. One of the things they want to look at is there rule of law in the country where I'm coming to do business? Because businesses will always face challenges where they have to, go to court to adjudicate. If there is no rule of law, and court will make pronouncements that, is not obeyed, it means that even businesses cannot try. So when we talk about rule of law, it's beyond the benefit that we get in terms of constitutional democracy. It even affects businesses, and that is why the government must take it much more seriously at this time.
So how do you expect the markets to trade the president's speech today? Is the first trading day since after the independence holiday, and of course the first one for the month.
Well, I think that the markets would not necessarily, as a country, we haven't gotten to that point where president's speech, if you analyze a market like the US, if the president tweets, that tweet can send the market south or north. They haven't gotten to that level yet where our market is, directly tied to the polity, because a lot of market players know that there are so many things that we still need to fix in our polity. Maybe until then, what is the market can pick from the president's speech that the government is serious at this time about the removal of petroleum subsidy. And I hope that that will remain and government doesn't budge by the time a lot of pressure are coming from labor. Now, what that said, what we would then expect is that sectors like the downstream oil and gas are likely to benefit, because that's one of the factors that has impacted on the performance of that sector on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, for example. Now, on the fixed income market, what we would expect is that the market would see this news, as some form of relieved pressure on government revenue. Even though we already have a plan for the borrowing of government for the year, what the market will just expect is that the government will stick to that plan and will price it appropriately. Already, we are seeing that after the last MPC meeting, yields have been trending downwards, and we are still likely going to see that, because from demand and supply mix, there is really nothing to change that course for now. So to that extent, we would expect that investors are pricing yields in the fixed income market in relation to the expectation in terms of supply from either the DMO or the Central Bank of Nigeria. But in terms of the foreign exchange market, we haven't seen there's been no calm yet. We're still seeing parallel market going as high as 460. At the I&E window, is still contrived at about 385 to 390. But we would expect that at some point, if there is no sufficient supply to make the market liquid, we will still see a lot of pressure happen at the I&E FX window. On the foreign exchange market, we still have a bit of issues that we expect that in the coming weeks, the central bank will be able to address, and the economy will be able to move much more faster than we are going right now.
All right, so we had the president reel out some of the economic reforms that the present administration is trying to put in place. How well do you think these reforms will shape the confidence of foreign investors in Nigeria? Because we know that latest data from the Nigerian Stock Exchange shows that total foreign transactions increased by about 12.69%. That was between July and August 2020. Does that signal some improved confidence in the Nigerian market for foreign portfolio investors?
Well, I think that on the part of government, like I said, it's never too late to start implementing those reforms. Our research division, for example, in 2018, when we're looking at the 2018 outlook, we issued a report then when we said reform or be relegated. In the actual sense, we have an economy, that is competing for funds from, all other economies within Africa, even other emerging and frontier markets. And one of the things, one of the dangers of not reforming your economy and making them attractive for foreign investors is that if you don't do it, foreign portfolio investors or even direct investors would fly over your country and go to the neighboring countries to invest. And that's one of the things that countries like, Ghana and Egypt, have enjoyed, in the time past. So it is never too late for some of those reforms to be put in place. And all I'm just going to say is to encourage the government to stay committed. A lot of people are losing, faith in government because they just feel that they are waiting for too long after 20 years of independence. 60 years of independence and 20 years of democracy. A lot of people are just, almost giving up and saying, can any good ever come out of the country? But I know the government can also be under pressure, from that perspective. But if they stay committed, to some of these reforms, even though the people may not understand what the government is trying to do, if the government is really sincere and is serious about these reforms, within, a matter of years, 2-3 years down the line, people will begin to see it and appreciate the government for it. Government should not be looking for people who wants to praise every policy, when they issue them out, But people sometimes will just wait and see how these, policies are being implemented to now see whether they are going to benefit the country on the long run. So my advice to government is to continue on the path of reform. If we do not reform, the country will become relegated. We're looking at foreign direct investment data, and you will see that, even before COVID struck, we started seeing a very significant drop. We've had a significant drop in FDI over the last almost 10 years, but FPI has not suffered that much of drop until we saw this COVID-19. And if you look at COVID-19, one of the consequences is that we've seen, significant drop in, FPI data. Now, what that means is that for government to continue to engender confidence, it might take some time. Some of these reforms, you won't expect foreign, portfolio investors, for example, to look at your reforms and just come, directly to you. Sometimes they also study to see whether you are committed, whether you are serious to it. So there'll be a lag between when we begin to see the impact in terms of, increase in foreign portfolio inflow. But in terms of foreign direct investment, the reforms that we're already doing in the real sector, deregulation of the downstream oil and gas, implementation of cost-reflective tariff on electricity are very critical reforms that on the long run will then drive the interest of most investors to now start looking at Nigeria as an investment destination.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Robert. Robert Omotunde is the Chief Investment Officer at AfriInvest Assets Management.